Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is your girl Najwa. Thank you so much for being here, and if you have not already, please go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Click the bell so you always know when I post a video. So today I want to talk about this sort of phenomenon that's happening in the Western world. Particularly I want to talk about the UK and the US, but it's happening all over the Western world, right? This rising level of loneliness, especially amongst young people, but among the older generation as well, and how that is seemingly leading to extremely radicalized behavior, whether that's on the right or the left. Um, so, in this video, we're going to essentially go through some definitions of basically what far right extremism is, what far left extremism is. I'm going to talk about my sort of views on the topic, but I'm also going to come from a scientific point of just what data there is out there. And if you guys don't know, myself, as far as political ideation goes, I consider myself a centrist. So I pretty much sit in the middle. And I guess if you could say that I belong to any party or anything, I would likely lean toward Democrat. I would likely lean towards libertarianism or Democrat. But I really don't like labels, and so I really just put myself as centrist because I go with what feels right to me and my set of values, as well as what seems right for society, what seems right for people in general. And I'm not saying that that is everybody's way to go, but I'm just explaining a little bit of where I come from. Now, I do want to go ahead and caveat and say that I would like to open up a lines of discussion for this video. And I really encourage you all to comment and put your thoughts in the comments and things like that. But no disrespect towards myself, towards any of the people mentioned in this video, will be tolerated. Your comment will be deleted. And something that you see in YouTube culture, which the YouTube algorithm, there were policies that were put into place by YouTube to sort of try and steer far extremism out of its platform. But you see that that's not really helping anything. The algorithm is still spitting out a lot of polarized content, and you can argue that my content is polarized, okay? But the reaction to it, the amount of hate, the amount of vitriol, the amount of disrespect, the amount of prejudice, racism, xenophobia, hate, violence, threats of violence that is ensued from these conversations that really should just be a place of democratic discussion where people with opposing views can discuss and at the end of the day respect one another. That's not really happening, and you see that the platforms are exacerbating this. So one thing I would say, friends on the right, friends on the left, all of you all, one thing that we cannot allow is disrespect and disregard for rules to sort of take over. And we have to embrace tolerance. We have to be able to tolerate people of opposing views, people of opposing background and differences, and at the end of the day, still work together to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish within these democratic states that we live in. And so that is my feeling on that. I'm going to go through a bit of an introduction here. So if you look up on the screen, you see a lot of thumbnails. I don't belong. So these feelings of loneliness, social media and the psychology of loneliness, why the far right are so weird about sex, decade of hate. This is what the life of an incel looks like. I have no friends, social media and the psychology of loneliness. Um, so yeah, this is a topic that's really heating the waves, and it's very important for us to discuss because we have seen the birth of the incel community. We've seen the birth of right wing and left wing terrorists who have committed acts, atrocious acts, that we can't turn back from. We've seen the storming of the Capitol, and so if people are lonely and they feel like they really don't have a place in society, and they feel like they've been rejected by perhaps the opposite sex or the sex that they're attracted to, and so hate and anger is just building up in them, that is something that we really need to not necessarily embrace, but we need to come from a place of empathy and listen to people and try and understand where they're coming from. If people are coming from a place where they feel like they've been rejected by society, taking sex and all of that stuff out of it, if we're not talking about incels, but talking about the far right who have really been radicalized, and they feel like, they've been rejected by society, they've been rejected by their parents, they're not getting the education that they want because perhaps they can't afford it. They're not getting the jobs that they want perhaps because they feel like they don't fit into these social constraints or conformities of what they're supposed to look like to do that. We need to not necessarily just look at that as, oh, we do not condone your behavior and dismiss you out of society. Bye bye, you're gone. We actually really need to listen to these people and see what can we do about it. So with that being said, let's move on to something interesting that happened with Obama recently. So recently, Obama, this was about 4 months ago, and he was giving an address. He was giving a public address for one of the representatives of Michigan. I think her name is Gretchen. Oh la la, I can't remember her last name. Uh, Something with a W. Anyway, he was giving a public addressing towards a large crowd. There was a heckler in the crowd, and the heckler essentially, we can't hear what he's saying, but he's, in the middle of Obama's speech, and Obama at this time, very ironically, is talking about tolerance. He's talking about how, we need to be able to listen to one another even if we have opposing views. The same stuff that I'm talking about right now. Democrats, Republicans, whatever it might be. And you can use the same lens if you're in the UK, if it's Lib Dem versus the Tories, if it's Tories versus the Labour. Basically, Obama was just saying people with opposing views, we cannot try to silence other people. And he has really, been outspoken in saying that he feels like sort of what's happened with the Trump administration, people who followed Trump, and this rising that we have of very extreme radical people is that, a disregard for the rules is really being taken up as a good thing these days. And someone is just in the crowd, yelling at him. And he basically says, hey, you know what? You wouldn't do that in a workplace. He basically says, hey, don't be rude. You wouldn't do that in a workplace. You will have your time to speak. That's what he says. You will have your time to speak. Set up your own rally. That's what Obama says to the heckler. And I think that this idea of just being outrageous, being loud and disrespectful just for the sake of it, we have to think back to what we were taught when we were little kids. Everybody should have their time to speak. And speaking on this from, personal experience, because my background lies in marketing, but part of marketing is psychology. So I've done a lot of, studying into psychology and research and how people's sort of thought processes work when they're making decisions and things like that. Now, I hadn't always envisioned that I would end up in marketing. I've always been a creative person, and art is what I've been passionate about my whole life. But there was a time, and I've been reading Obama's autobiography, and so I'm also just thinking about those days, back when I did canvassing for Obama back in 2008, when I was 15 or 16, and I was so proud and so excited. I think back to that time, and I very, very easily could have led myself into politics, but I did not because I saw that there was this brewing underlying tension of just extremism that, looking at the Nancy Pelosi attack, the attack on her house. And that's what Obama, he's also speaking about this at this time. It just shows you the lack of insensitivity. He's speaking on the fact that Nancy Pelosi's husband almost got murdered by one of these extreme people. And, this guy is just shouting at his face. We need to re-embrace common sense, but there's something deeper going on here. I feel like we need to take a look at the psychological implications. But anyway, I very easily could have led into politics, and I do not think that that's ruled out. One of my favorite shows is Desperate Housewives, and yeah, I know I love a lot of old shows like Lost and Desperate Housewives, but they're the throwbacks because they just don't make shows like that anymore. And Felicity Huffman's character, oh gosh, what was her name? Lynette Scavo. So she, at the ripe old age of 50 or whatever it is, 40, 50 years old, after her kids are out of the house, she basically runs for local politics. I could very well see myself being that person because it's a journey. But the way that Obama basically tells that heckler, you'll have your time. I think that's what a lot of people who have been caught into this need to know. You can have your time, but go about the right way doing it. Just, anarchy for anarchy's sake, disrespect for disrespect's sake. It's really not going to get you far. And what I discussed later in this video, there are implications to that, that might really be detrimental to your mental health, to your physical health, your physical well-being, because we know of the people who they've been radicalized and they have unfortunately taken on their own lives, or they've been caught up in craziness. Think of the people who stormed the Capitol, who unfortunately lost their own lives because, they put themselves in a dangerous situation. So there is another way. So let's keep on forging through this. So another example of someone who really just, I feel, has had a common sense, an engaged and informed opinion and thought on this sort of situation, but also coming from a place of common sense and kind of what I was speaking on, what Obama was speaking on, is Bill Maher. So I'm going to link all of these in the description, all of the sources that I discuss here. But Bill Maher basically says that he views it as there are two types of leftists and there are two types of right wingers, right? Okay. He basically says he feels like there's the old school right wingers and there's a new school white wingers. Well, that's so hard to say, right wingers. And then there's the old school leftist, and there's the old school and the new school leftist. And basically, for both of those, he feels like what he explains is this concept of he feels like, and I agree with him, that the old school left and the old school right, maybe they did not have the same views or opinions, but they weren't doing the radical things that social media has incited us to do today. And I'm going to get to the social media aspect in a second, but many politicians for a decade, for probably more than a decade now, have been speaking on the role of social media in radicalizing people. And me, myself, I think that loneliness, social media, feeling like you've been rejected by some of these conformist, routes, areas of society. This is part of what has produced this extreme radicalization of the left and the right. And so basically, Bill just says, he feels like we can't go on this way. We basically need to get back to sort of the traditional left and right where, we can have opposing views, but we don't destroy facets of our nations in the process. Right now there's such tension between the left and the right, but it's coming from the most extreme portions of those parties, and it's got to be put into check. You can actually see lots of articles that have come out about Trump and his 2024 run. And that's actually what Bill is talking about in this video. He's talking about his predictions for the 2024 presidential election. And Trump, he's dividing people, And I really wonder what it's going to take for people to see that it's not good. It's really, really not good. And if you look at a lot of the news coverage right now, essentially people are saying that the right really is having a hard time controlling Trump. You know, like the right needs to get him under control, and I feel like society is sort of, in general, I will say, is looking at, you know, Trump and the far right extremists in that way. They're wondering when the situation is going to be put under control. So let's look at what the internet gives us as the actual definition of right wing and left wing terrorism. So, according to Wikipedia, right wing terrorism, it is so hard for me to say right wing, right wing, right wing, right wing. Right wing terrorism, hard right terrorism, extreme right terrorism, or far right terrorism is terrorism that is motivated by a variety of different right wing and far right ideologies. Most prominently, it is motivated by neo Nazism, anti communism, neo fascism, eco fascism, ethno nationalism, that's a new one for me, religious nationalism, and anti government, patriot, sovereign citizen beliefs. And occasionally it is motivated by opposition to abortion, tax resistance, and homophobia. That's wow. Okay. Modern right wing terrorism largely emerged in Western Europe in the 1970s and after the revolutions of 1989 and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. Okay, that definitely sounds familiar to me. It emerged in Eastern Europe and Russia. Right wing terrorists aim to overthrow governments and replace them with nationalist or fascist regimes. They believe that their actions are trigger events that will ultimately lead to the establishment of these authoritarian governments. Although they frequently take inspiration from fascist Italy, Nazi Germany, and Imperial Japan, with some exceptions, right wing terrorist groups frequently lack a rigid ideology. Right wing terrorists tend to target people who they consider members of foreign communities, but they also target political opponents such as left wing groups and individuals. The attacks, which are perpetuated by right wing terrorists, are not indiscriminate attacks, which are perpetrated by individuals and groups who simply seek to kill people. My lord, we're going to pray. The targets of these attacks are carefully chosen because the targets of these attacks are often entire sections of communities. They are not targeted as individuals. Instead, they are targeted because they are representative of groups which are considered foreign, inferior, and threatening by them. Whew. Oh my lord. Okay, so before I really get into any interpretation on that, let's just go through the basic descriptions and definitions. So let's move on to left wing. Alrighty, so left wing terrorism. Left wing terrorism, according to Wikipedia, or far right or far left terrorism, is terrorism motivated by left wing or far left ideologies committed with the aim of overthrowing current capitalist systems. The overthrowing of capitalist system is definitely a key um it's definitely a key part within left wing terrorism. And it seems like, I don't know, I mean, in ways it seems like sometimes this becomes a part of right wing terrorism because they often want to overthrow the government. Um, but the government is also wrapped in capitalism in a lot of ways. So I find there to be these underlying connections between the two of them. They're extreme on two different sides, you know, but the polarity almost sort of brings them back to this middle ground in a weird way. Did you guys understand what I mean? Anyway, let's keep going. So, committed with the aim of overthrowing current capitalist systems and replacing them with communist or socialist societies. Left wing terrorism can also occur within already socialist states as criminal action against the current ruling government. The majority of left wing terrorist groups originated in the aftermath of World War II and were predominantly active during the Cold War. Most left wing terrorist groups that had operated in the 1970s and 1980s disappeared by the mid 1990s. One exception was the Greek revolutionary organization 17 November or 17N, which lasted until 2002. Since then, left wing terrorism has been relatively minor in the Western world in comparison with other forms of terrorism and is now mostly carried out by insurgent groups in the developing world. Okay, so with that being said, let's move on and let's talk a little bit about the Capitol, the storming of the Capitol. Really can't talk about radicalization of the people who feel lonely and rejected by society without talking about the storming of the Capitol. My God, just seeing those scenes and those images on TV just breaks my heart, and it reached down into a deep, dark place. You know, democracy was put into place for a reason in the United States, and it exists in the United Kingdom too, even though that's a constitutional monarchy. Democracy is a huge part of both of these nations. It is the idea of existing and um, having a sense of fraternity. I am American by birth, but I live in France. I've lived in France for the past 5 years, and it's like that, liberty, equality, fraternity. That's a part of France's tenets. And even though you do have the far right here in France, often it seems like the political weight is just a little bit different here. And people with the storming of the Capitol really like to focus on Ashley Babbitt. I feel very, very bad for Ashley Babbitt, but something that people who have been radicalized seem to struggle with is empathy, and EQ, like emotional quotient, that emotional intelligence. They might have a certain level of IQ, but it just seems like the emotional part they don't understand. And the thing that the people that Donald Trump, has been putting down for the past 7 years, you know, Jewish people, women, black people, these people have been persecuted on a massive scale in Western society for a very, very long time. Tons of people lost their life. Look at the story of Emmett Till. And I don't, as I've said many times in many videos, I do not like to speak in terms of white and black. My husband is white, my best friend is white. Like I don't like to always be speaking in terms of white and black. It just seems like a very sad, silly way to live your life. But those are the constructs that society has created. And, there was this white woman who she knew very well the place that she was in. She knew very well the situation that she put herself in. She knew that it was dangerous and she lost her life. I feel very bad for her family, but I mostly feel bad that she even descended down this path of destruction for herself, along with the other people who were there. And she got, shot by a black officer. And within this community of extremely radicalized people, Ashley Babbitt is really put up on a pedestal, and I don't want to go too much into that, but the emotional part of this that people don't recognize, the irony is that this is things that is essentially the black community has been saying for a very, very long time. Almost every day you turn on the TV and some black guy has been shot by the police, and likely it was a white police officer. And there is no outrage. But when this person who clearly put herself in this situation, because many of those black people who lost their lives, they were innocent. But this person who put themselves in this situation, she becomes a martyr. And the thing about the radicalized people, the people who they literally have been sucked into this extreme thing of that's based on racism, that's based on xenophobia, that's based on sexism, that's based on anti-Semitism. They don't see the irony in their martyrs when other people who have such generational trauma from systemic perpetuated stuff like this, how we've been saying this for a very long time. Now, I want to talk about two people kind of connected to the storming at the Capitol. The first one directly connected, and the second one a little bit more indirectly connected. The first one is Benjamin Phillips, because I feel like a lot of people like to talk about Ashley Babbitt. But when I looked at this guy, Benjamin Phillips, and I read about sort of how he got led to the storming of the Capitol, and how he passed. He didn't pass from someone shooting him. This was different. It just struck me as very, very peculiar. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt from the New York Times. So it says Benjamin Phillips, 50, the founder of a pro-Trump website called Trumparoo, was chipper as he drove a van of fellow Trump supporters from their home state of Pennsylvania to Washington. He told the Philadelphia Inquirer that it felt like the first day of the rest of our lives. Mr. Phillips died of a stroke in Washington. Those who accompanied him to the Capitol told the newspaper. The exact circumstances of his death are still unclear, and his family could not be reached for comment. A friend of Mr. Phillips told the news channel WNEP that Mr. Phillips had sold stuffed kangaroos dressed like Mr. Trump at the president's rallies. His website, now down, billed itself as a social network where American patriots can mobilize against corrupt communist Marxist scummy Democrats. Now, I feel like within the Democratic community, within the left community, people look at these people and they don't see people. They just see these crazy people that did this crazy stuff. And it's like they feel like there should be no sympathy for them. But I look at this story and I feel utter sympathy for these people, because clearly they were battling something in their own lives, and they saw some resonance in this call of action to storm the Capitol. They saw some resonance in MAGA and this whole campaign of making America great again. And, these are people. These are really people. And I just feel so bad, because you look at this guy, you see that there was something that he believed in enough to drive a van of supporters from Pennsylvania to Washington. And when he got there, he had a stroke. Now, this is what I was talking about. If you are lonely or rejected and you feel like you finally found this community, I know that there's some part of common sense back there in the back of your head telling you that maybe this isn't the right way to go about doing it. And that is validated by society telling you that this is not the right way to go about it. But instead, people continue on. And this guy had a stroke at 50. What more do you need to know? His body, physically, his body literally told him, no, this is not right. This excitement that you have evoked in me is not right. And, so we're going to get more into the psychology of this in a bit. The next person I want to talk about is this person named David DePape. Now, guys, when I saw the storming of the Capitol video and I saw Nancy Pelosi and all the House representatives and things, the politicians who were crouched up in that room, you could see the fear on their face. You could see people calling their family. It really, really wants to make me cry. You could see the people calling their family, thinking that could be the last time that they ever speak to their loved ones. If you could imagine that, if you're being lonely, if you're rejected, and, if you've had a hard life and you see this as your way out, or you see this as your beacon of hope, but think about the implications of this. Think about the deaths that came from this, and put yourself in those shoes. Put your family, your grandmother, Nancy Pelosi, just think if this was your grandmother or your grandfather. And David DePape, he is the guy who broke into the house and literally almost murdered Nancy Pelosi's husband. And, I looked at the video essentially explaining sort of who he was, a video that was explaining kind of who he was, and the path that sort of led to his radicalization. Now, it was, a firsthand account from his boss. And his boss was basically saying that he had met this guy, David DePape, outside of sort of a Home Depot type place, No, it was on a lumber yard. And he was saying that he was hanging out at the lumber yard almost like people do at Home Depot looking for work. And so his former boss needed some hand. He needed a hand that day, so he hired him for work. And eventually, he established a longer term relationship with him and gave him more and more work. And so he was homeless before, and he was able to find the boss was able to help find him a place to live. He lived in this garage of a single family home and that he rented out, and he seemingly was turning his life around. But at the same time, trauma, homelessness, poverty, um, the things that we really need to take a look at in society, mental health, this was still brewing in the background, even though he was pulling himself together and he was on this path towards repairing his life. And I don't really know much about how he became homeless or anything like that, but I can imagine it. I don't imagine that he came from a super functional family. That's usually not how these stories begin. And his boss was saying he just saw him slowly being radicalized. Now, guys, this is so sad, like this is really pointing to the fact that mental health in the US and the UK really needs to be addressed. So, let's move on. I'm going to read the Wikipedia description of this person called Nigel Farage to you all, who, if you don't know him, this is going to be helpful for the next section of this video, in which we look at some findings, some study behind this radicalization. It's an article from Psychology Today, and it references Nigel Farage. And I know that my audience is probably mostly coming out of the U.S. and they might not be as familiar with him. So let's read through this. Nigel Paul Farage is a British broadcaster and former politician who was leader of the UK Independence Party from 2006 to 2009 and 2010 to 2016, and leader of the Brexit Party, renamed Reform UK in 2021 from 2019 to 2021. He was member of the European Parliament, or the MEP, for Southeast England from 1999 until the United Kingdom's exit from the EU in 2020. Now, you guys know from my other videos speaking about Harry and Meghan, or if you have watched those videos, how I feel about Brexit. It was just a rushed decision. As someone who lives in the EU, it just seemed like this really was not thought through very well, and it had xenophobic motivations. And right now, looking at how the UK is doing economically, it had very, very dire implications. It's been 7 years on now since the referendum, and the economy still doesn't show any signs of really picking back up, especially for the everyday working man. It seems like it really benefited a lot of billionaires and millionaires in the UK, but more and more people are using food banks. A lot of um, senior citizens have frozen to death this winter in the UK. It's very, very sad to watch. But anyway, we will continue. He was the host of the Nigel Farage Show, a radio phone in and global owned talk radio station LBC from 2017 to 2020. Farage is currently the honorary president of Reform UK and a presenter for GB News. Now, y'all know how we feel about GB News because they have gone after my girl Meghan Markle and her husband Prince Harry. So anyway, that's a red flag. Known as a prominent Eurosceptic since the early 1990s, Farage campaigned for the United Kingdom's withdrawal for the European Union. Farage was a founding member of UKIP, having left the Conservative Party in 1992 after signing the Maastricht Treaty, which I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. If I did not, I am sorry. Which furthered European integration and founded the European Union. After campaigning unsuccessfully in European and Westminster parliamentary elections from 1994, he was elected MEP for Southeast England in the 1999 European Parliament election. He was re-elected in 2004, 2009, 2014, 2019 European Parliament elections. So this guy he's really influential. In the European Parliament, he was the president of the Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy, or EFDD, where he was noted for his speeches and as a vocal critic of the euro currency. So that is also a common theme amongst the far right of the European Union, or former members of the European Union. He became the leader of UKP in September 2006 and led the party through the 2009 European elections, when it won the second highest share of the UK popular vote with over 2 million votes. He stepped down in 2009 to focus on contesting Buckingham, the constituency of the Speaker John Bercow, at the 2010 general election and came third. Farage successfully stood up in the November 2010 UKIP leadership contest, becoming leader once again after Lord Malcolm Pearson voluntarily stepped down. He was ranked second in the Daily Telegraph's top 100 most influential right-wingers poll in 2013, behind Prime Minister David Cameron. That name sounds familiar. I'm sorry if I'm not getting all the references, guys. I'm not British. Farage was named Britain of the Year by the Times in 2014. In the 2014 European elections, UKIP won 24 seats, the first time a party other than the Labour or Conservative have won a large number of seats in the national election since the December 1910 general election, pressuring Cameron to call a referendum on EU partnership. Wow, this is putting a lot of puzzle pieces together. I don't know about you guys, but when I am doing research, I often am the person who reads the abstract and doesn't read anything else, or I read the abstract and the conclusion and I don't read anything else. Because that's been taught to me and my studies, from having three different, post secondary studies. It's a great way to sort of get the full picture when you need to do a lot of research and condense down your work. So I often will literally look at where something or someone has begun and then where they ended, and then that way you can get through stuff fairly fast. So Wikipedia, you could just be reading all day, and we are not going to read this guy's entire Wikipedia page. So essentially I've jumped down to since 2020, this section of his Wikipedia page. And I mean, just from that, the introduction portion of the Wikipedia page, you can get a clear understanding of what his background has been. Again, I'm talking mostly to Americans or others here. UK people probably already know much more about this. Um, it says, since 2020, after gaining no seats in the 2019 UK general election under the Brexit Party banner, Farage said he would leave the country to work as a warm-up speaker for Trump's 2020 campaign rallies. Now, this right here makes so much sense to me, because take a look at where the UK was in 2019 with Brexit. I feel like Brexit came in with Boris Johnson putting so much firepower behind Brexit and inciting so much propaganda around it that 2016, it was like MAGA. It literally was like MAGA. It was like the British version of MAGA. It was like people were really, really excited. Again, this group of people who felt marginalized, who felt disregarded, rejected. It was like they were really excited about that. And then take a look at 2019. If you look at the US and the UK at the political um, environment, the sort of the political heat of that time and the mood, people have become fatigued, and it seemed like people, even right wingers, had started to question, okay, guys, what have we gotten ourselves into? And so seeing that he gained no seats, under the Brexit Party banner in 2019, and that he was like, oh, I'm going to go and do it for Trump then. Screw you, UK. I'm going to go over to US. That right there sort of just highlights this it's this common sense thing, when society is telling you, okay, this is probably not a good idea. It might behoove you to listen, to take heed. Anyway, I digress and I continue. In June 2020, Farage was exempted by U.S. officials for the country's travel ban under a national interest clause while Trump prepared for his first major election campaign rally since the COVID-19 pandemic. So the U.S. put a travel ban on this. They were like, no, you cannot do that. When, the constraints of society, of authority, were put there for a reason. It is often marked in the Bible, because I am a person of faith, and I look at some of this and I wonder how any of these people can be people of faith, because I just don't see how any holy book out there could condone behavior like this. Um, but in the Bible, basically, God is very, very clear. I don't have any scripture at hand with me because I didn't plan this, but there are many scriptures that basically show that God, you know, at least from the biblical standpoint, is he says that you should respect authority. You should respect rules, because these rules were put into place by God, like if you think about the Constitution, how much, faith and a lack of secularism is embedded within the United States. Even when we pledge allegiance to the flag, if I'm not mistaken, God is mentioned in that. To be just rejecting, it's sort of like what Obama said. You can't just ignore all these rules. You have so many of these far right people just blatantly really having no regard for rules. And we've seen that anarchy just does not work. It's the Lord of the Flies thing. It does not work. And laws are put into place for when your common sense just don't kick in. So that travel ban was like, Farage, Nigel, this isn't a good idea. But that common sense and Nigel, I guess it just didn't go off. So anyway, on June 20th, he posted a picture from the US and was later spotted at the Trump rally, taking part in a Team Trump on Tour panel discussion. Farage appeared in the audiences of rallies in states such as Michigan and Pennsylvania. Okay, that is very telling. In an Arizona rally on 29 October, Trump called Farage one of the most powerful men in Europe and invited him to speak on the stage, where he described Trump as the most resilient and brave person he had ever met. After the day of the election, Farage conceded that Trump lost fair and square, but said Donald Trump loses the odd battle, but he doesn't lose wars. He keeps fighting until he wins them. Very, very dangerous men. Very, very dangerous. In 2021, Farage undertook a 6-week tour of the United States organized by the conservative group Freedom Works. Entitled America's Comeback Tour, it saw him address Republican grassroots audiences across the country. So, with that being said, let's get into this Psychology Today article. So I found this article from Psychology Today, and I found it extremely interesting and extremely informative. Um, When I was in university for undergrad, psychology today was often considered pop psych or popular psychology. And sometimes, your professor would let it slide, but sometimes they often would say that it was a source that was not as strong. Um, but if the study within psychology today was less of an opinion piece and it was more based on the foundations of a scientific study, you probably were closer to be able to use that as a creditable source. So I'm not saying that this right here is like the be all and end all, is that the way you say that, end all and be all? Sorry. But I do think it presents some really interesting points. So this is from, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this name wrong. So it is Ahash Imamzadeh. And it's why people support far right political views. Social dominance orientation and right wing authoritarianism are examined. I won't read every piece of this from here. As I told you guys, you probably pretty much gleaned on my research skills, on my research tactics, which is to synthesize as much as I can. Otherwise, you'll be reading all day. But let's just read some of this. So, social dominance orientation refers to a preference for social inequality, of course, one in which one's group is superior to others. He's getting right into it from the start, y'all. Right wing authoritarianism refers to a combination of three characteristics: submitting to authorities unquestionably, adherence to conventional norms and morals, and aggressiveness towards individuals or groups considered outgroups or deviants. In an article published in September-October 2019 issue of Journal of Community and Applied Social Psychology, Van Eich, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, and colleagues suggest that social dominance orientation and right-wing authoritarianism can explain American and British exceptionalism. So this comes back to kind of what I was talking about, like that Brexit and MAGA mentality that sort of has really captivated the lonely and the people who have felt rejected. They have been opened up to be radicalized, and sort of how that happened. So, you know that this study is approaching this issue pretty head on when you scroll down and you see a picture of Donald Trump himself. So, study one, the first investigation was a meta analysis of 20 studies and over 15,000 participants. Results showed a strong and positive relation between far right support and the following: prejudice, social dominance orientation, and right wing authoritarianism. So again, this is pointing to why extremism fundamentally is not sensitive to the plight and the struggle of so many peoples within the societies that these people are representing. The reason we live in a democracy is because our society and the rules, the constraints within place within society need to be reflective of the needs of the majority of everyone. Everybody's got to get a little bit of their piece in there. And so the fact that this extremism is associated with prejudice in itself, that should tell you that this is not the right way to be going about things. So it's okay to be a Republican. It's okay to be a Tory. It's okay to be a right wing person. It's okay to be a conservative. But when your conservatism is literally marginalizing others, when it's inciting hate, when it's inciting violence, when it's inciting prejudice, um, that's when bodies are showing up. That's not what democracy is supposed to be. This is why Trump is so dangerous, and this 2024 election is going to be so important. Whew. Okay, so I won't go too much into the correlations here that it goes through, but um, we'll just scroll on down to study two. So, data for the second investigation was collected before and after the 2016 U.S. presidential elections. The participants, 160 pre-election, 250 post-election, so that's quite a small sample size, but um, okay, were mostly American citizens of white European ethnicity. Four assessment tasks were measured prejudice, social dominance, right-wing authoritarianism, and far-right support are listed below. So, um, prejudice, discrimination against blacks is no longer a problem in the United States. That's so funny. Social dominance orientation. An ideal society requires some groups to be on top and some others to be on the bottom. Okay, okay, I can argue that I understand where that's coming from, but yeah, once it's radicalized, once it's so extreme that you basically want to turn the US into Nazi Germany, yeah, I'm not really getting the logic behind that. So right-wing authoritarianism, obedience and respect for authority are the most important virtues children should learn. Obedience and respect for authority. Yet, so many of these far right-wing people have no respect for the process of democracy. That's so ironic. Okay, and then far right support, depending on the sample, prior versus post election, participants were asked if they were planning to vote for or currently supported the program or ideas of Donald Trump. Results of this two-part investigation not only confirmed the findings of Study 1, but also indicated that the right-wing authoritarianism and social dominance orientation have a strong relation with prejudice and in turn and voting support for Donald Trump. Now, I am like I'm in agreement with this study, with its findings, and with this connection with the first study. The only thing I would say is that the sample size is really really small, and so more research needs to be done on this. Like even to the point of when I literally went online. At the end of this video, I'm going to give some advice to those who may be being radicalized themselves. If you're watching this video and a little pang of anger or resentment is coming to you, um, I encourage you to stay to the end because I feel like there I could have been you. I really could have. I feel like what I was talking about in the beginning of the video of when I was younger and I was so excited about politics. And before I went into a career in marketing, I very easily could have gone into a career in politics, or I very easily could have gone just into being a little angry ball of vigilante hate. So I can understand this idea, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on some suggestions because I really do think this is just coming back to feelings of loneliness and rejection. Um, but there's a right way to go about this stuff. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. So study 3 says this longitudinal investigation tested and extended previous findings. The sample consisted of non-immigrant English citizens 3 months prior to the Brexit referendum in 2016, time 1, and weeks after it, time 2, and 6 months later. Of the 600 participants at time 1, about 430 participants at time 2, and 340 at time 3. Measures used were similar to ones from the previous study, except that far right support was assessed using a question about support for the UK Independence Party. Results showed, among other things, that right wing authoritarianism and social dominance were linked with more prejudice longitudinally, and prejudice was linked with support for Brexit. Okay, so this is interesting. This is interesting. Okay, so the right wing authoritarianism aspect, this aspect of obedience and respect for authority, even if it's to a fault, and that's kind of how I felt like both Brexit and, well, you know what? Brexit is a little bit different from MAGA in that respect, in my opinion. I feel like basically now, whenever I post a video, for example, speaking of my support for Prince Harry and Meghan, who we know, they were a part of the royal couple. Meghan, American mixed race actress, married into the royal family. And when they called out racism, when they called out xenophobia, um, they were essentially booed out of the country. And even after not being there for 3 years, they are still constantly vilified, talked about in the media. And I've said many times in those videos where I speak about them that the people who sort of defend the monarchy feel like they need to defend the monarchy by trashing Harry and Meghan. They really seem like the monarchy's guard dogs. It seems like so much hate has been incited to these people through propaganda, and they act as like the security blanket, and it's not right. It really, really is not right. And so I feel like that's where the UK versus the US is a little bit different, because I feel like within the UK, there's much more of an era of conformity. There's more of a history of classism, deep, deep, deeply rooted classism, than what necessarily exists in the US. And so I feel like, as I've said in other videos, I feel like the US is in a little bit in a better shape to approach this situation head on and really make some meaningful changes and put forward some meaningful solutions to reach a better place. The UK, there's it's a different animal. I digress and I continue. Moreover, the article continues, moreover, support for Brexit and the UK Independence Party was associated over time with higher prejudice and right wing authoritarianism. These findings suggest that support and voting intentions are entrenched in people's beliefs and attitudes toward ethnicities. Specifically, the reason people high on right wing authoritarianism vote for Trump and the UK Independence Party may be that they believe these politicians can protect law and order and defend traditional norms and values. A lot said there. And the reason individuals high on social dominance orientation do the same is that they like to preserve their status in socioeconomic dominance. Manifest destiny. I mean, it's clearly all about manifest destiny, and it's taken on different terms today. It's taken on GOP, Tories, far right wing extremists, right wing terrorism. But yeah, manifest destiny. That's what this is about. And we don't, this is 2023. It's just there's no place for this today. There's no place for this. And you know, people feeling like they've been rejected by society. Um one of in my other video, debunking racism, I spoke about, for people who truly make it a precedence, an effort to really, really have friends of all different backgrounds, a multicultural set of friends. And I don't mean water cooler friends, I mean real, true friends, friends that are as close to you as some members of your family, friends that um, drive to the airport, the friends who they send you pictures of their kids, they send you Christmas cards, that you go on vacations together. Um, this this context of really opening yourself to socioeconomic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, subcultural backgrounds different than yourself, it's really a killer of racism, of xenophobia, because that's what this is at the end of the day. It's racism and xenophobia. It's classism. It's privilege and fighting tooth and nail to fight for what you think is your privilege. But you know, you get somewhere in the world by hard work. It's not about stepping over one subculture of people, one minority, one majority, or etc. And that's how one is successful in this world. That's how one's generations that come after them, their children, their grandchildren, are successful in this world. No, it comes from hard work. So just, you know, do your work, put your head down, do your work, be tolerant, travel, travel and see how other cultures live and get some friends other than people who look and talk and think like yourself, and be tolerant, try and listen for once instead of talking over people for once, and use your common sense, use your emotional empathy. And if you find that you have no capacity for that, really seek some support, like sometimes it's not a gut feeling that really is just right. Sometimes it's pure like lack of mental health. If you need to, seek some support. But anyway, off of my soapbox. Um, Trump and the UK Independence Party may believe these politicians can protect the law, etc., etc. The reason individuals high on social dominance orientation do the same, etc., etc. Okay, so additional findings. The results also suggest that support for far right parties is associated with greater prejudice and right wing views over time. Okay, so I just talked about that. Even before getting to that, the authors speculate the presence of a reinforcing mechanism. People supporting and upholding just prejudiced and right wing views become more supportive of the far right too. And at the same time, right wing voters become gradually more bigoted and intolerant. Um, yes, 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 yes. And in a second, I'm going to talk about the radicalization of like the far right young people. But I think that it's happening to older generations as well. And I think that a lot of it is associated with isolation. It's like these people are connecting over being isolated, and it's breeding this hatred, this bigotry, this intolerance that is very, very scary to watch and that has no place in 2023. Cole concludes by saying, oh, well, so Van Ash and colleagues conclude that far right European voters share much in common with Trump supporters. That is no surprise to me at all. So the article concludes in saying the key grievances of the far right in Europe arise from threats to tradition and norms and values, economic changes, and immigration, with immigration the most intense issue. As I've said in my Harry and Meghan videos, I know that people want to protect their values, they want to protect their traditions, they want to protect their norms, but persecuting other groups, women, blacks, Muslims, Jews, minorities, you know, disabled people, homosexuals. This is not going to be the way that you're going to protect your traditions. In fact, it's going to be detrimental towards it, because society has reached a point today of there's a level of progressiveness that exists in society, and for you to just want to basically reform us back to the dark ages, it's the systems that are put into place are not going to allow that to happen, and it's not going to go easily. So yeah, I this is very sad to watch the world have to deal with these issues that you would think would just be common sense. You would think that this would just be common sense. And I think this also starts with the education of people, their parents to their children. How are you really cultivating self-love in your child and not having them try to look for love outside of themselves? How are you raising your children to really get along with people of all different colors, all different races? Are you really making a concerted effort to do that? Like from the very lowest prong of society, in which the way we raise our children, the way that we approach history in schools, all the way up to the high levels of politicians, of monarchies, not condoning this type of behavior, renouncing this level of behavior. It is all important, and it has to happen. Otherwise, we will be dealing with a full blown insurrection of just polarized thoughts constantly plaguing our everyday life and existence. So it continues to say the predictors, prejudice, social dominance, orientation, and right wing authoritarianism show similar associations with support for the far right. This is true in the US and Europe, and not only in present research, but also in previous investigations. Given these similarities, we may wonder just how different are the nationalistic and populist adherents of Trump and Farage's UK Independence Party from those supporting Le Pen's National Front in France. Oh my God. Yes, and Marine Le Pen in France is like, I mean, amongst the people that I know, is looked at as a joke, but at the same time, it's not a joke. People more and more, they're looking for, like we said, that sense of belonging, and people are subscribing to these extreme views. Um, and then it says Wilder's Freedom Party in the Netherlands, or Mutin's alternative for Germany. And so, yeah, we will end that at that. We've discussed a little bit of what politicians, at least some politicians have spoken about, or what their backgrounds are with far right and far left extremism and radicalization. Let's talk a little bit about essentially how I feel like social media loneliness. All of that is kind of connected. Now, there's this article here from CNBC, and it is called Loneliness is on the Rise and Younger Workers and Social Media Users Feel It Most. Sinya survey finds. I think that's how you pronounce that. So 3 out of 5 adults, 61%, report that they sometimes or are always feeling lonely. Wow, guys. Wow. That that is the saddest thing I feel like I have ever heard. And this is not just talking about young people, because young people has been a huge bulk of the research on social media loneliness and all that stuff, this emergence of this culture of isolation. um but that says 3 out of 5 adults, so that just means literally every person above 18, 61% of these people feel lonely. My God, how sad is that? And if we don't think that this, stemming up of this radicalization is not connected to loneliness, then we have just got some major blinders on. So it says among workers aged 18 to 22, 73% report sometimes are always feeling lonely, always feeling alone, up from 69% a year ago. There is a greater feeling of loneliness among people who use social media more frequently. Now, this right here, this is the crevice of one of my major causes that I really I want to commit myself to. I want to be able to play my part in it and do what I can to help, because I feel like I was talking to a friend, and we were talking about how we feel like this generation coming up now, they're all, I mean, for lack of better terms, screwed up, maybe it seems like, because they just did not have a childhood where social media technology wasn't the focus. We were talking, my friend and I, we were basically saying, like, our generation, we did have cell phones, I guess, around the age of 13 or whatever, but before that, we really just had a time where we had to sit down with our families. We had to enjoy one another. Like we had to go outside and play. Like there wasn't all of the entertainment sources that we have today, like the phone, the news, and all of that and stuff. And so when I went and looked at the Bill Maher excerpt that I spoke about earlier in the video, he also spoke about this idea of, like, there was a time before social media where social engagement was just a part of everyday life, because you didn't have this machine that had all these distractions that took you away from that. And I feel like the radicalization of the far right and the far left, the incel movement, all of the MAGA, the Brexit, this extreme type of people who are stemming up, I feel like there needs to be more studies from the psychological, scientific standpoint because these people shouldn't just be dismissed. It shouldn't just be like we're like, oh, we should just throw them in an institution and get it over with. We should just arrest them and get it over with. Oh, we disbanded this one group and it's done. No, I feel like these people really need to be listened to, because I feel like they're coming out of a place of extreme loneliness, um, extreme sense of feeling bewildered, of not really fitting in society, of feeling rejected. I mean, rejection seems like such a thing. And then here it says at the bottom, at work, men appear to feel much more isolated than women. In a second, I'm going to get into some reformed incel people. But look at the incel movement. Look at how much um, anger and pent up um, rejection, body image issues, fear, fear that it has manifested itself as deep, deep anger and resentment towards women, towards the people who have given birth to society, who have given birth. I mean, how can you hate a gender of people of which you come from? How is that possible? And so I feel like, several things. I'm going to give some advice on this later, but we really, really need to do more research into this. This needs to be a subject that we don't just shy away from. Um, like I said, I feel like these days people are just, they're allowing themselves to be silenced, because I get it. I get it. It's scary when people are saying, no, 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 no. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. No, 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 no. And then, social media creates this space of it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 4 weeks out of the month, 12 months out of the year, 365 days out of the year. You have a place where you can just spew whatever thought that is on in your head in a hateful, disrespectful way, and there will be no accountability for it. But I mean, I also think that social media, it needs to be regulated. I mean, something needs to happen with social media, because clearly it's producing this animal. People aren't using their own practicing levels of self-control to say, okay, time to turn Instagram off. Time to put down Facebook. Time to put down TikTok. Time to pick up a book. Time to call my friend. Time to call my family. People aren't doing that themselves, and we clearly see that this has terrible implications. It's also creating health problems. I won't get into the health problems here. I'll have to do another video about this, because this is already very long. But there's studies that show that social isolation leads to health problems even. Um, for example, something that I notice when I post these videos about Harry and Meghan, just from getting a sense of the people who are coming in and trying to attack me, trying to silence me, trying to actually silence Harry and Meghan, these are the same people who I talked about. They're sort of like the monarchy's lapdogs. It seems like they are, really scared and bewildered that their ideals, their traditions could be threatened, and so their instinct is to go after the people who are calling out racism and xenophobia, like the people within the Sussex Squad who defend Harry and Meghan, the people who speak out against Brexit. There is this mechanism of trying to silence. And I look at these people, I look at their comments, and I just think it seems like the rhetoric, the discussion, the exchanges, that's the word that I'm looking for. It seems like the exchanges of extremely, extremely unhappy people. I look at their comments and I'm just like, I don't see in any world where you could be a happy person. I don't see where you have a cultivated relationship with your family, one that's positive and based on a foundation of love, tolerance, support, open mindedness. I don't see where you could be fulfilled in a certain area of passion or your career. I just don't see that, because people who are fulfilled, they don't go and barrage a bunch of hateful comments on a stranger's social media page. They don't storm the Capitol. They don't go on this crazy roundabout tour with travel bans and things like that. And that's still not deterring them from seeing, you know, from showing them that they're going down the wrong path. You know, that you see what I'm saying? So I feel like loneliness is really, really connected to this, and people need to take a look at that. So one more, well, three more things, and then I'm going to get to my advice for this. And that's really interesting is that here on this social media communication loneliness among older adults, the mediating roles of social support and social contact, I feel like this loneliness thing is also hitting the older generation because also in my videos speaking about Harry and Meghan, and those also touch on my feelings on Brexit, how Brexit is sort of connected to this, you know, the authoritarianism, the right wing authoritarianism, and those confirmation biases that we talked about in the beginning. I feel like a lot of older people are also being radicalized, and I think that that is also connected to these levels of isolation and loneliness, and they are learning to really navigate social media just as well as young people, and many of them are being radicalized as well. So I won't get into this much, but I thought that that was just an interesting point to make as well. Like, part of when I talk about Harry and Meghan and I support them, you can just tell you can just tell that a lot of people who come in with the hate, with the lack of support, the rhetoric, the violence, the hatred, all of that stuff into the comments, you can tell that they are Karens. You can literally tell that they are older individuals who really like just they have bought into this radicalized Trump or Farage type of mentality, you know? And so again, I won't get into that too much, but I also thought that that was an interesting point. We have here two inspiring and courageous stories from two former incels. And the reason I call this inspiring and courageous is because, and if for you don't know, incels is a community of people, mostly men, like majority men, who feel that they have been rejected by society, rejected by women, and really rejected from having sex with women. A lot of it is surrounded around sex, and they have joined this community of very male dominant, pro men, you know, anti-abortion, anti-homosexual, oftentimes anti-liberal, really just anti-women organization. I mean, it's not an organization, but a movement of men. We'll call it that. And they exist online. They exist on social media. There are many different corners of the internet where they kind of populate and congregate together. And it's just founded on a lot of hate, especially around women, a lot of resentment, a lot of jealousy. And these are two people who were former incels. One is Jack Peterson. I believe he is American. And then James, who's 31. We don't know his last name. He kept himself anonymous, probably for protect security reasons. But he's British. And these are two people who literally they went down that rabbit hole and they were fortunate enough to come back. And I want to say that they're inspiring and courageous because I know it's not easy to feel rejected, feel lonely, feel isolated, and then you're radicalized, you know, and the groups that are radicalizing you, the politicians that are radicalizing you are literally prophetizing off of your suffering because oftentimes they have other ulterior motives. And these people know that something's wrong. These former incels, they know that something's wrong. They know that, you know, if we're just speaking morally, it's not right. You know, it's not right to just be trashing women like this. It's not right to be encouraging this culture of men who look at themselves as victims, and who, you know, some people are so extreme they refuse to interact with women in any circumstance, you know. So imagine that. I just imagined some guy rolling up to McDonald's, the drive-through, you know, and he's got a woman trying to take his order. He just peels off. Just imagine that. Some people literally make it a tenet, a life value to avoid women, trash women at all costs, you know. And so these are two people who saw that, hey, this is wrong. You know, common sense needs to kick in at this point. And if common sense isn't kicking in, the powers that be need to say something, you know. And Trump, Farage, them inciting all of this hate, they are doing so much damage than they know. And the platforms who remain complicit in this, you know, even this platform that I'm speaking to you on right now, remaining complicit in this, it's not right. It is morally reprehensible and not right. And so, and once you get locked into these groups like this, you know, people do not want to see you leave. You know, just for me speaking about how I support Harry and Meghan, seeing how polarizing those videos are, how people come on telling me really nasty stuff. You can also see how when you pull away from this ideation of a large group, you know, just the lashback that comes with that, it can be hateful, it can be stressful, it can be scary. And so that is why I'm saying these people are courageous. I mean, I can get it. They are very courageous to have walked away from this. I wow, just wow. I mean, there is no other way that I could just commend these people, because they had the courage to walk away from something that is clearly morally wrong. And I'm really in support of that. So good job for these guys. So, another inspiring, courageous person that I find is TJ King, or AKA, as I know him, as the Amazing Atheist, because I fortunately really didn't have much insight into this guy when he was a part of the anti SJW movement. And people call him really the grandfather of that movement. And it's so ironic because he has since walked away from that life. And just like those former incels, I find this guy to be very inspiring and courageous. Now, I am a Catholic, I'm a person of faith, you know, and my faith is very important to me. But my husband is atheist, and I know other atheists. And being an atheist doesn't mean that you don't have the capacity to be a morally sound and interesting, creative, intelligent, well spoken, tolerant person. And he still is trashing people who are doing dumb stuff. As my dad would have said when he was alive, DS, dumb stuff. You know, so, but he's no longer really speaking out against people who are literally advocating for social justice. I mean, can you imagine how ironic that is? People who are speaking out for social justice, for tolerance, for equality, for multiculturalism, for humanity, for peace, you know, for emotional intelligence, for empathy. These people, inclusion. You know, these people are being vilified by the anti-SJW movement. And it's, I feel like that movement has much died down since like 2017, 2018. I feel like it's lost a lot of its traction. I feel like between 2013 and 2000 and say 15 or 16, it was more prevalent, but I think that it's pretty much dying down now, because people are seeing, you know, this isn't right. Even people who literally were, you know, really tooting their anti SJW flags, um, a lot of them now have channels renouncing that type of behavior. They're still critics, you know, and that's great. You know, you should not just take everything that society spoon feeds you and just go, oh, whoa, that is great. That's okay. That sounds right. You know, of course you should look at things with the eye of analysis and criticism. But to denounce the things that people are working towards, so people are less oppressed in society, so that there's more multiculturalism, more inclusion, you know, that's not what you should be working towards. And TJ is one of these people who has seen the error of his ways, and he's been humble enough to admit that and change his life. And now, of course, you know that there's going to be a lot of lashback from that, but he has somehow managed to navigate that very smoothly, I might say, because he's still the same person. You can see that he's still the same person. You can see that he's not, he hasn't sold himself. He hasn't sold himself out. He's not sold out. You can see that he still has that level of looking at what's going on in society, looking at what's going on in politics and popular culture, and using that eye of discernment, that he has had in the past. But it's less offensive. It's less offensive towards people who really are just doing the same thing that he's doing, advocating for what they believe in. And so, as long as you're not being violent, as long as you're not being threatening, as long as you're not threatening, the very tenets of democracy, if you're not breaking the law, you should not allow yourself to be silenced. You really should not allow yourself to be silenced. But people who are just trying to destroy the things in this world that we're trying to work towards a more progressive future, that really needs to be taken a look at. Guys, we have finally made it to the end, and here's some advice which I've put in another video as a standalone video, but this perfectly wraps up this video as well. This is advice for the lonely who are possibly being radicalized. I know, cringe, cringe, cringe. I know I'll get lots of fun stuff in the comments, but really, this was just created as a space where people should be able to put their bags down, put their baggage down, and feel free to just speak. Like, you can just come here and speak your truth. You're not going to disrespect me. That's going to be one way that your comment is going to be thrown out in the trash. But yeah, so it's okay, guys. You can take a little advice from Auntie Naj, and it's okay. So, my advice, the first one would be to seek support. Now, there's clear within the studies that we've just looked at that radicalization comes with a certain level of um, emotional and psychological withering, the withering of psychological health and emotional health. People aren't happy. That's that's a simple and clear way that you can put it. People aren't happy. And so when you're sick, when you're physically not well, you go to the doctor. It's the same thing when you're not happy, when you're not feeling good. You can seek some support. Now, whatever that support might be, there's several different ways, several different routes you can go down that. You can go down it in the manner of seeking out psychological support. You can reach out to a group, a grief group. For example, if you had a recent loss that's really affecting you and that's sort of influencing you being radicalized. If you're dealing with some type of addiction, you can seek some sort of program like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous if that's some the type of support that you need. If it's a support group, whatever that might be, it is okay to seek support. The next point would be embrace diversity and really, again, part of these radicalized groups are wanting, manifest destiny. It's literally manifest destiny. So, one of the biggest killers, as I said, of racism is really traveling and seeing how other people live, but also by exposing yourself to other communities right where you're at. So, making friends of other cultures. So if you're white, make some black, some Hispanic, some Asian friends, and have those friends be real friends. Really take the effort to listen, to be empathetic, to be respectful, to be kind, and just really embrace it. You can also travel. If you don't have the money to travel, you can do that right locally where you are by making friends from other backgrounds. And like I said, true friends, like embracing diversity, but really, guys, really embracing it. The next one I would say is that self care is okay. So, oftentimes we live in this day and age where we get so overly consumed by social media and things like that that we literally we can't pull ourselves out of it. It's like scrolling through all of this is it consumes us. We have to do it. It's like how do you call it? It's like a tick. It's like a nervous tick. It's where like you can't let it go. And I just picture that person who's sitting in their game chair in their mom's basement or whatever it is, just sitting there, sort of vegetating in this one place in a room. And it's like they can't move away from it. They need to respond to this Reddit post. They need to do this. You need to do that. Come off of the digital space for a moment and take care of yourself. Um, and that is in very simple ways. For example, your skin. People so often forget to take care of their skin, and it's our biggest organ on our body. Are you taking showers? Are you regularly bathing? Are you washing and moisturizing your face? Are you using products that basically prevent you from having acne if you have a problem with acne? If you have something like psoriasis or what do you call it? The E word, eczema. If you have eczema, are you really taking care of your skin? Like, are you taking care of your hair? Are you combing your hair? Are you eating properly? Are you eating proper vegetables and things that grew in the earth? Like, self care is a big thing and it's really important. Your physical health is just as important as your mental health. So if you feel like you're being radicalized, really take the time to take care of yourself. My next piece of advice would really be to build closeness with your family. Oftentimes, when people are isolated and they're being radicalized, a common thread that I'm seeing is that the people in their life really had no idea what happened, and oftentimes these have very grim endings. Don't cut yourself off from your family. Now, if your family is extremely toxic and dysfunctional, I can understand cutting those type of people out. But if there are other people within your blood relatives who are, understanding towards you, they're supportive of you, they're open-minded, they're tolerant, lean towards those, and the more toxic ones, sort of put some separation between yourself and those people. And also don't forget your friend family group. Friend family groups are so important. So yeah, the next one would be practice positive group activities. That is another great way to really get yourself exposed to a level of inclusion and open mindedness. Like if you can afford to go to university, if you're young and you decided to just graduate high school and not go to school, I really encourage you to at least try school, even if it's community college, because it really introduces you to other parts of society that you might not have been exposed to if you hadn't. If you are older and you've already been to university, or if you not maybe you aren't older but you don't really have the money for university, or you don't want to go, whatever it might be, involve yourself in group activities like taking a life drawing class, like taking a painting class. It could be going to a club crawl with people with similar interests. If you're into games, a certain game or a certain film club or whatever it might be, where your passions lie, or even if you don't have those passions, get into something new. Go and explore something new. Meetup is a great place to do stuff like that. Groupon is a great place to go and discover things like that. Group activities, they really cultivate this level of feeling less isolated, feeling less lonely. And I really recommend that to you. The next point I would say, don't let rejection get you down. And I would say, especially to the people who are being kind of attracted to those movements, like the incel movement, like these radicalized far right movements, don't let rejection get you down. Like, even if you feel that you've been slighted in society by jobs, by romantic partners, whatever it might be, respectfully, do not let that get you down. You have to be resilient. And part of the points that I made before this point is what's going to help build that resilience for you. Continue to reiterate some positive mantras to yourself. Get yourself involved in some group activities and things like that. Embrace diversity. Seek out that psychological support if you need it. Take care of yourself, and then keep doing it. It's like rinse and repeat. Do not let rejection from employers, from romantic partners, from society, what any perceived slights, do not let that get you down. Don't let it get you negative. Stay positive and build that resilience and perseverance, and have the courage to keep going. Um, I would also say you should try your very best to, keep trying if you get rejected. And I'm speaking on this mostly in terms of romantic partners. If for Because I hate to see people who are clearly, they can be funny, they can be intelligent, they can be smart, and they feel like, oh, maybe I haven't won the genetic lottery, maybe I don't come from the most affluent background or whatever, and they're attracted to this incel community. Literally, if a woman or if a romantic partner rejects you, and you get really down about that, and your instinct is to go towards these radicalized groups, I encourage you to try and reach deep within you, to find that patience, to find that self confidence, to keep trying, because I guarantee you there's someone out there for you. If you just keep cultivating that beauty within yourself. Some people, they don't find the person that they're really supposed to be with until much later in life. And that's okay. Keep keep focusing on that self-growth and that self-love, and respectfully keep trying. Now, if a person makes it clear with you that they aren't interested in something romantic with you, don't turn into a stalker now. Don't push something on someone. But respectfully, you can try again with another person, and if that person rejects you, keep working on yourself. Take some time to yourself. Maybe take some time to really just explore the growth within yourself, explore that self-love, and take care of yourself. Like that self-care that I said. Take care of your skin, take care of your nails, go and work out, eat healthy, and build that up on yourself, and then try again. And then if you get rejected again, rinse and repeat. That's how the world does it. Like, my husband is wonderful, but I had to go through a lot of rejection, a lot of losers, really, to get to that point. So don't give up and keep working on yourself. My next piece of advice would really be to read and meditate. I feel like we are living in a culture where we don't really read much more anymore, and we also like choose not to look at how we can go into introspection in a positive way. A lot of times we look at isolation and introspection as a negative thing, but it can be a positive thing. Look inside of yourself, and really try and focus yourself on being positive. I would suggest for you to look into Buddhist meditation, for example, and if it's not meditation, look into a meditative practice for you. Now, that could be anything. It could just be sitting down in front of a candle and meditating, but it could also be going dirt biking. It could also be, taking a drive. It could also be going for a swim. It could be going for a walk around your neighborhood. Take that time to really practice self love through cultivating a meditative space, and read more, and read books, all types of books. Don't get caught into the radicalized books. Look into books from all types of people, especially if you feel like you're being marginalized. I really recommend for you to read books from the groups that you are targeting within, your radicalization. So if you really are against immigration from Arabic countries and things like that, I really recommend for you to read some Arabic writers. If you're really an anti Black Lives Matter person, read some some books from some renowned social justice players. And yeah, that's read and meditate. So the next point I would say would be play some sports and engage in outdoor fitness, and not just in a gym. Really, like, go outside. Nature is There's so much beauty to be found in nature. Don't let that go to waste. And our physical bodies are so closely linked to our spiritual and our mental bodies. So playing sports is a great way to cultivate a cognitive sharpness, but it's also a great way to meet other people. It's a great way to engage and build lasting friendships. And we know that there's also adult sports that you can partake in as well. So look into your local parks and recreation. Look on their websites and see what sort of outdoor activity or sports outlets that they may have. Look online, see if you can find any local amateur sports communities, or if it's just a case of going to your local lake, your local pool, or if you like, the gym is okay as well. But I also really recommend going outside for some things. If you have a dog, go for a run with your dog. Go play frisbee with your dog. It really, really makes a big difference. And the last thing I would say is that, the alternative community often is just that. They're very, very, very alternative, and they're very skeptical of everything that exists within like the pop culture space, films, movies, series, foods that people are talking about, raving about. Often the alternative, the radical culture dismisses that altogether, which, in communities like these where they feel like they're isolated, they feel like they don't have friends, they feel like they've been marginalized or whatever, it's a double-edged sword because they don't really engage in those, social constraints or those social interest pieces that people really are curious about. And at the same time, they say that they're really lonely or isolated. So, give another chance to some of those popular culture music or movies or series or foods and things like that. Give it another chance before you dismiss it, because really those are the conversation pieces that happen amongst friends. Like, don't be so radical in your belief, and don't be so quick to denounce everything that, popular culture or the media puts in front of you. If you take another look at it, you might see, oh, okay, like I feel like this artist, I don't really like their music, but I can see how people think that this is a really good vocalist. Or that movie, I really don't think that the plot is very strong. But I did watch the whole thing, and like we can talk about it if you want. Or, oh yeah, I have heard about this new food that everybody's raving about. I tasted it, it was okay. Like, just give it a chance, because, you know, you can catch more flies with honey than salt, and if you are complaining about being in a community where you feel isolated and lonely, and yet, the stuff that people are interested in, and you reject everything, it just doesn't work like that. So try to be less radical, and be more tolerant, be a little bit more curious and willing to explore and hear the depths of different things within society, and not just shut down what someone else might be so excited. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I tell someone like, "Oh, I really, really love this artist," or "I really, really love this song," and people are like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that before. I don't like it. It's not really my thing." I like, yeah, it's stupid. Like, I hate that. I hate that. I hate that artist. Just think about how that might feel for the other person. Try to tap into that empathy. Um, so that is my advice. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I hope that this has been helpful. If you have not already, go ahead and do me a favor. Click that like and subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next one. Also, click the bell so you always know when I post a video. Thank you. Okay, see you in the next one. Bye. Bye.